Anemone, which we are very proud to have as a world premiere at the festival this year. I'd like to first invite to the stage the film's co-writer and director, Ronan Day-Lewis. We also have with us actor Sean Bean. Co-writer and lead actor Daniel Day-Lewis. Congratulations on the film, all of you, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
I thought I would start by asking you, Ronan, and Daniel, to just tell us how this started, because you co-wrote the film. When did that start?
Yeah, so I had for years this kind of vague sense of wanting to write something about brotherhood and find a way into that kind of archetype. And at first I thought maybe it could be a coming of age type story or something like that. And then at one point when after my dad, had stopped acting for the time being, he said to me that he wanted to find something that we could work on together. It turned out that he had independently had this inclination to do something about brotherhood, so that was really the seed for us, and we kind of followed that.
Daniel, do you want to?
And that sums it up really. I just wanted to work. We've grown over the years since all this person. We made things together of different kinds, and I regretted the thought that he would go on to make films and we wouldn't have had that experience together. But when we set about it, I imagined that somehow we'd keep it contained in such a way that it would be a sort of very private experience. And but the trouble is that every stroke of the pen, if you sort of free yourself during that part of the process, then you make it less and less possible to keep it that way. So, initially it was just two fellas in a shed. At a certain point, we got really sick of being in that shed. So we need to get out of the shed. We need Nessa, and then we became sort of focused more on Nessa and that other part of the story.
What was it about the theme or the archetype of brotherhood that attracted you, that you wanted to explore?
Well, I have two brothers, and I think there's this sort of beauty and tragedy to brotherhood, and just that kind of volatility where things can go from veer between love and rage in a matter of seconds, that I was really fascinated with, and I think we both were really interested in the sense of silence, and just how you can almost, siblings can have this almost like telepathic communication with each other, and how many different silences can exist between brothers and between siblings.
What was that writing process like for both of you?
It was interesting. We started very kind of intuitively, very low stakes. Like we didn't have any sense of, we didn't start with an outline or anything, which is very different from past scripts that I've worked on. So we were kind of almost like walking into the dark with a flashlight. We had the sense of there being this man who's living in a state of kind of self-exile and living in this remote environment, and his brother turning up after 20 years of no contact. But beyond that, it was, we didn't really, the circumstances of their past and their lives and their kind of, their connection started to reveal themselves over time, and it was very much, there was a lot of improvisation that went into it, where my dad would actually speak as the characters, and especially Ray, I started to feel him kind of slipping into that character really early on in the process, which was remarkable and unexpected. But yeah.
Was it always understood that you would play Ray?
Not. I suppose with hindsight, I think it probably, if I was going to end up doing it, it would be that. But initially, I was really equally fascinated in Jem's experience.
because as you've noted, I mean, it is quite a contained film actually, because a lot of it, is a two-hander, and obviously the role of Jem is hugely important. If you could say a little bit about just casting Sean and working with him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a huge admirer of Sean's work for years, going back to Game of Thrones, watching Game of Thrones when I was 13, and so there was, I was, when we first started talking about Jem, I really, I couldn't, it was actually hard for me to imagine anyone else playing it, so I couldn't, we genuinely couldn't imagine anyone else, so. It was really, it was a relief when Sean connected to the character and wanted to do it. I was over the moon, and it was just a delight to work with him.
Sean, your response to the script?
Well, I love this. As soon as I read it, and Daniel called me, and couldn't believe it was calling me. Actually, we talked before. I did a job called Time that you didn't go in the script. It was a television series, and Daniel was kind enough to bring myself and Stephen Gray when we both started in Time, and offer his compliments. But I was quite gobsmacked by that. To tell you the truth, I was even more gobsmacked and surprised when he called me and told me about this wonderful script that Ronan and he had written, and I was very flattered and honoured that you should ask me for starters, and then after reading the script and seeing its content, its potential, and the beauty, the poignancy, and these incredibly fractured and mysterious characters, I was just blown away by it, and it was something I wanted to. I was just so much looking forward to working with these guys.
I was curious, Ronan, whether the sort of aesthetic choices were already clear to you when you were writing the film, because I could see a very different film about the story, and I think it's striking that your choices are in many ways more expressionist than realist.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how, if that was present for you from the beginning.
Yeah, it was interesting because, like you said, it's a story that could be told in a very different way, as almost like a kitchen sink drama, and there was always those ingredients, those kind of very human, kind of archetypal ingredients to it. But I think even in the first 10 pages, I think the way that more expressionistic or kind of metaphysical element crept in was through the weather. Like there was even in the first 10 pages, there was all this rain and just the sense of the elements kind of in concert with the human mystery and human drama. So I think starting to sort of follow that thread gradually over the course of writing, we started to kind of accept more and more of these kind of images or strange occurrences kind of into the fabric of the story. Like the Nessa visitation was one of the first ones where she's floating in front of the bed. Sort of one of the first instances of that we incorporated, and over time I think we just became more and more liberated in the writing process to kind of go into abstraction at times. And then when I was kind of planning when we were designing the film, and I was sort of imagining sort of visual language, I think my work as a painter in the last few years has definitely, even if unconsciously, influenced the palette and the sense of magic sort of underneath the surface of these events that also obviously have this really deep root in reality and historical kind of framework. Yeah.
You mentioned the silence between siblings, brothers, and I think one striking aspect of the film is just a mark of the confidence of the film, I think, is also just the reliance on silence and long wordless sequences. And I think the first half hour of the film, very few words are exchanged.
There were a couple of books, it's not that it didn't become a reference for this at all, but it had stayed with me. One of those, Kent Haroof, who wrote books Plain Song and Eventide, which everyone's familiar with those, but very beautiful, very moving books about a community in, I think it's Colorado, it's in the West, right? But and you get to know number of different people in that community, and the characters that really stayed with me were two bachelor brothers who were ranchers, elderly bachelor brothers, cattle ranchers who lived in a house and they loved each other, but they didn't really speak. Yeah, that's something that stayed with me when we set about. And there's one thing that we didn't mention about the writing of it is that we managed to it took a long time because we only ever wrote when we were in the same room together. So we never tried to do it remotely at any point. I mean, things would occur to us independently, and then we would, chat on the phone and come together. But Ronan's schedule was pretty busy after he left college, so we just decided that was the way we wanted to do it, and I think it worked best for us like that.
Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think that the gradualness of the writing process definitely contributed to the sense of just following the characters. Like it felt like we were sort of forced to take enough time after each sort of burst of progress on it to kind of reflect on that and sort of iron over it, and by the time we kind of we followed them to the next scenario, the next scene, the next location, it felt like we really had time to reflect on how they would react to certain scenarios, and so by the time we got to the first draft, it felt like it came out far more kind of fully formed than I expected, I think, because of that. Yeah.
So I guess it's important in the film that there are also a couple of really remarkable monologues. Well, there's the war crime one and the Guinness and Curry one.
Works as a menu.
Yeah, sure. Which came first?
I'm a new idea.
If I remember correctly, the Guinness and Curry came first. Is that accurate?
Yeah. It came out quite quickly too. But it's true that when we looked at it afterwards, we thought, well, what can we do now? What happens now? So it was a bit of a conundrum, like having. Anyway,
But then I think the fact that it appeared to us so relatively early in the writing process, it felt like Ray announcing himself to Jen, who he is now, and also announcing himself to the audience, but then also the film kind of announcing itself to us, I guess, in a way where it changed. I think it changed the tone of the film pretty considerably in what we, how we went forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and in matters of faith too, like Jem and I had come from a very, very strict religious upbringing, and so it was the minute that Jem walks in the door, it's very clear that his faith is still alive in him. He's still, that is the root of his core beliefs, the root of his movement through life, and so it's really just like saying, well, that's who you are, but this is who I am now. But I've seen everything that Sean has done. We started out as youngsters, more or less at the same time. We met one time very briefly at a casting session, and I, followed Sean's work throughout the years, and just it's always beautiful, but like more and more and more, the work that Sean was doing was, just really beautiful to me. And you mentioned Time, but also Broken, the series Broken. I don't know if anyone saw that, but Sean played a priest in a very difficult parish in the north of England. Did you feel that connected in any way with what we were doing, Sean?
I guess it connected in the fact that I played a priest, and then you did that to a priest. So there is that connection, but I guess that I was very a Catholic priest. knew was a weak point. It's not a weak point for Jen because he falls back on that, whereas Ray finds solitude in the woods and a little comfort on his own, but he's still haunted by his memories, these ghosts. Jen finds religion, and Ray knows that when he's doing this wonderful scene that he did, and as you said, this is who I am, and you can come here with your religion, your beliefs, but this is who I am now. And I think, but all those you know, in regards to time, and when you saw me in that, Daniel, I think that you know, there are similarities throughout, and you know, one man's faith is another man's kind of poison. I'm critically honoured that you should just say that about me, and I compliment it. I'll remember that the rest of my life. Thank you.
Can you say something about? Can you say a bit about the second monologue?
Yeah, the second monologue is interesting because it came pretty quickly after the written monologue, like very early on, and that one, with the written one, even though it felt pretty unusual to kind of have that intense a kind of reveal about a character, that big a dialogue scene that early on in the film, it felt like the silence that kind of preceded it almost allowed for that. Whereas with the war crime scene, I think it was very clear to us that we had to basically withhold that as long as possible. Like as soon as that came into being, I was like, okay, this is the whole film is going to be almost about withholding that and kind of creating this drip feed of information, and it became this sort of dance in general. That sort of informed the way we thought about that sort of revelation of information about the characters and about also the kind of stranger elements of the film in terms of how they reveal themselves to the audience.
So you studied painting, right?
Yeah.
But was cinema, I assume, given your parents, cinema was a big part of your childhood. Was it about watching a lot of films or being on film sets?
Yeah, I mean both actually. Yeah, I was really lucky that my parents showed me so many films early on that when I was really young and just throughout my childhood that I probably wouldn't have otherwise discovered until like way later. So yeah, I remember. Yeah, there's so many films that I'm really grateful to have seen at a young age, and then also spending some time on set. Like when my dad was making There Will Be Blood, we lived in Marfa, Texas for a few months when I was like 7, which that landscape, the desert, and then also that experience of going on set and that sense of kind of make-believe and of creating this world that was so expansive was so intoxicating to me. And then also when parents were making this film, The Ballad of Jack and Rose, we were on Prince Edward Island for that when I was like 5, so that was a really amazing experience.
Which ones made an impression on you that you watched as a kid?
I remember my parents showing me Taz pretty early on when I was like 5. And that was definitely left an impression. And then I also remember Rocco and his brothers. Like there's a scene in that film that I never forget. I haven't actually seen since, but it definitely burned itself into my memory.
They picked some good films. I just should also note actually that your mom, Rebecca Miller, has a film festival, which is also premiering next weekend.
Yes, very exciting.
I'm curious what kind of a filmmaker you are. Do you do a lot of takes? Did you have to figure that out? Do you feel like you knew how you wanted to direct before getting on the set?
I think there was a lot of kind of, it felt pretty intuitive once we were on set, and as far as how many takes. I think that was something I was particularly nervous about going in, is how will I know that? And I think it reassured me pretty early on that I felt like I had an instinct about that felt pretty consistent. But as far as I think having the frame, the kind of substrate of knowing the visual language of the film, the sort of tonal language of the film so deeply going in, kind of gave me a bit more confidence and felt like gave me more of a footing in other areas that I was far less experienced in. Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear from Daniel's perspective. You had taken a break from acting for a few years, but you had taken breaks before in the past. So I'm just wondering what is it like to come back to acting? And in this case, is it different because you're working with course you have worked with Rebecca before too.
Yeah, it's coming back to the work that I love. I felt that I had a vocation at a very early age, as a child still, that was going to be my future one way or another, for better or worse. And I hoped that I would remain working for some time. And yeah, I have taken time away from it. Apparently I've been accused of retiring twice now, but it would never occur to me to use the word retirement, because I have stopped working doing this work because I wish to do some other work for a given period of time. And in the case of the latest one, after the last one I made, I was in very low spirits. I made a fucking fool of myself by, announcing that I was going to stop working, and, probably a bigger fool of myself coming back, but to deny myself the possibility of working with Ronan just to stand on my pride, I think that would have been, probably, a worse decision than just, well, I said that, so I'm sticking to it. But it didn't occur to me after the last one, I've had long periods where I thought I'm not well suited to, the work was always very precious to me. It was like food and drink. But I think I have it in common with a lot of actors that I'm ill suited for the life around it, the public aspect of it. Like a lot of us, we're sort of rather it's a paradox, we seem to be begging for attention just by virtue of the fact we're doing that work, but it never really occurs to you that you can't switch that attention off. Well, if you get it, if you're lucky enough to get it. And there's nothing to moan about, because it means you've been lucky if you do get if your work is paid attention to. But yeah, I was always ill at ease with the public aspect of the life, which very much involves the promotional part of it, and I thought I'd get used to it, and I never really did, and so it sort of left me wondering if I wasn't just better off, keeping out of it.
Sorry to make you do this.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm grateful for a chance to talk about it a little bit, because I realise that it raised questions, and of course it's daft to make statements about stuff. You're meant to just crawl away and die quietly. I know that's, it just seems so self-important to me. But in that case, I was at a very low ebb, and I thought, I'm doing this because I don't really expect to find my way back to the appetite for this work again, and I did, and I'm really grateful for it, and I hope I do again.
I think we're all grateful for it too. We're going to take a few questions from the audience, but there are actually people with microphones. So yeah, if you want to just start. Please wait for a microphone to get to you.
I can speak very loudly.
Do you think we should wait for the microphone?
I want to thank you very much for really a marvelous experience here. I hear you speaking a great deal about process and making a film, and I understand that that's of major interest to all of us, but for me as a viewer, this film felt biblical. And I'd like to know how you feel about my feeling as a viewer that this is biblical.
I feel pretty good about that.
Absolutely delighted.
But more, I mean, was this something intentional, and do you feel that we, maybe in 200 years, people will be looking back at this film as we look back on our Bible and Old Testament? Could that be something you have projected?
Well,
be a rash assumption to think that in 200 years, I mean, fantastic, is it?
Yeah.
Also looking at it, but I think it did happen very naturally that it grew up between us. That aspect of it, which allowed, within one family, allowed us to see two possibilities of existence with or without faith, and so yeah, but it wasn't. It wasn't. We didn't feel guided to, consciously towards doing that, but it did emerge very naturally, the aspect of faith in the film. And I have a very dear friend who was in the British Army, did a full career in the British Army, and he has very deep faith, and we've had many discussions. I'm not of the same faith, but we've had many discussions over the years about that, and I think something of those conversations probably found its way into this.
Yeah, I think also there's, as far as there was a book I looked at a lot in prep called The Book of Miracles. That was this book it's an illuminated manuscript from the 16th century with all these folkloric and also Old Testament illustrations of these events that felt like there was, blood rain and massive hailstorms and these kind of cosmic occurrences, and that was also really essential in kind of finding the tonal and sort of visual world of the film and how to kind of merge that with the realism of the characters' stories. And I think that I always knew that I wanted the film to have a spiritual quality to it without being Christian, without the film being Christian. But I think that the biblical imagery, has always been really fascinating to me.
Thank you for the film. It's really a great piece of work. There's this distinction. The film is in this particular era in England. There's the background of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Then, of course, you are English yourself, Ronan. You've had this distinctive upbringing in America. I'm curious about how the difference between those two countries sort of comes through in both of your mutual creative process.
Yeah, it was interesting because I spent 7 years in Ireland growing up, from 7 to 13. So, and my dad obviously has had long connections to Ireland and was living there by the time he met my mom. And so I think we both had, we didn't know immediately that the Troubles were going to become a kind of historical framework for the film, but we both started to kind of instinctively gravitate towards it, I think, as time went on. And I learned about the Troubles a lot in school growing up, and so they really loomed large in my imagination, I think, for as long as I can remember. And it was, I guess the fact that my dad had, I'd love to hear you speak about it, but like the fact that you had grown up in England also kind of gave us a unique sort of window into, we felt like the Troubles had been tackled a lot from a certain vantage point, and I thought it would be interesting at a certain point to explore it from a different vantage point without the film, even though without the film's side, like the film's point of view being merged with the point of view of what you could call the oppressor in the situation, but for the central character to have been employed by the oppressor, I think was something that interested us.
Congratulations for the great film. Thanks, Daniel, for coming back. We are very happy to have you back, and please don't take long breaks anymore. I'd like to know from you, Rowan, how was it to work with your father? I know you guys wrote the screenplay together, but since your father is considered the king of acting, was it intimidating to tell him what to do exactly the way you imagine the scenes. And did he listen to you? How was this?
Yeah, no, it was, I think I had like two great advantages. One, as you said, we wrote the script together, so we had spoken so exhaustively about the character and the kind of emotional trajectory of the story and just the Ray's world, that by the time we got on set, we kind of had this shorthand when it came to these scenes where we didn't say nothing, but there was a lot more silence and kind of trust that was possible. And I think another aspect is also just our inbuilt familiarity. Like any other young filmmaker would be so intimidated to work with him and to have that dialogue and give notes and be collaborative in that process when you're on set. And I think I was very lucky in both of those regards.
Actually, Sean, I'd be curious to hear you say a little bit about sharing the screen with Daniel, and also just sort of working within father-son dynamic.
Yeah, it was fascinating. It just felt very natural from day one to be working with them both, and it was a kind of seamless relationship. And as you just mentioned, the kind of tacit understanding and unspoken thing that they had between each other, and that was understood. And I met Daniel before I came up to Ireland to see it, and we got to know each other, and we spoke to on FaceTime to Ronan. It all felt very natural, and that proved to be the case on set. And Ronan was very funny on set. I love his humour. He likes mine a bit, don't you? We got on very well, and Danny was kind of foil to that, and we all felt just very natural. I think we just fell into place immediately. It wasn't the kind of thing where I felt overawed in any sense, and I was very welcome to these two incredible artists. I was welcomed into their world, and it was kind of effortless in some sense, and that's due to their personalities and their generous humour.
I'm afraid we are out of time, but I want to thank you all for coming